Get ready to meet Yuki, a young franking adventurer, who in the eyes of the world, it was nothing more than a simple porter. But everything changes when he decides to sacrifice his own life, to save your party from a deadly Demon King ambush, in a ranks dungeon. Impressed by your courage, the ruler of darkness makes an impossible proposal. Instead of dying, Yuki will become a monster tamer. Or the secret, to help monsters conquer the dungeons and prevent the extinction of their species. Now Yuki needs to live a dangerous double life, balancing between being the asset, demonic army's secret, and a rising hero in the human guild. All this while seeking power, needed to resurrect your friends, and change the fate of a world doomed by dungeons. You are on ManhwaCapped's channel, and that's the story we'll see today. You know, right, actually, leave the like at the beginning of the video, and shove as much as you can. Find out if you are already subscribed to the channel, if bell is activated, and consider becoming a member, which is very cheap and helps us a lot. Made it, no more wingdings. To start with this story that is simply, look Subimba. The magician cast a burning spell into the air, the flames hit the dragon's wing full on. The purple dragon roared in pain in the back row. A man screamed for his activate a speed increase spell. Bisa was a rank-warrior shaman affiliated with the Golden Time. Then, the man ordered Lotus, kept the fire medic going. Lotus was a grappling wizard also of the Golden Time. After there was Lu, she was a third-class swordsman. Glass, wielding the savior's sword, told her to wait for an opening and finish the fight. Who gave the orders was Kanan, a Golden Time ranked in D in swordsman. The last person to receive instructions was himself. Yuki told him to stay back and stay hidden. He was just a rank, no class, and no affiliation. A huge backpack hung from his shoulders. Bisa, Lotus and Kanan attacked at the same time. They kept the attack until this. Here find the perfect moment. She activated a skill. Flaming was luminous lash. In the even eye, the dragon was hit in various parts of the body. The dragon let out the last roar before falling to the ground, and what the ranking fighters watched with admiration. As expected of them, they had defeated a dragon with ease. Decades had passed since the disaster known as dungeons appeared in your world, along with the adventurers who challenged her. Even so, humanity still hadn't managed to clean completely or number ever-increasing dungeons. As a result, neglected and undiscovered dungeons often caused dungeon ruptures, becoming a serious social problem. Even worse, many adventurers hunted monsters just for money and refused to clean the dungeons. Just a small number of heroes really understood the danger and led groups like this towards full conclusion. Suddenly, someone slapped the Yuki backpack. Was Kiss. He called him a porter and demanded a potion. Immediately, Yuki hurriedly turned over the bag and Sambo, pointing out that unlike Yuki, he was really risking his life on the front line. He added that, even though Yuki was known to Sir, never expected such an insignificant weakling accompany the crew. They despised him for being the rookie adventurer, lowest ranking. He almost had no mana. It was slow and overall, completely hidden in their eyes. Conan interrupted them. Both men froze. He reminded them that they were inside a dungeon. Estimated as rankings, there was no place for idle talk. They apologized. Then Conan turned to Yuki, told him to take your role seriously and do your job right, as he was still a member of the group. And what answer? Yes, sir. They continued deeper into the dungeon, and what agreed with Conan's words. He realized that he still lacked consciousness, expected from an adventurer. Had been too excited, watching top-notch adventurers in action. He meant that he had learned a lot. At the same time, it made you painfully realize the enormous difference between them. He didn't even have a class. One day I wanted to become adventurous like them, lost in thoughts. He failed to stay alert. Noticed loot and warned him to take his eyes off the target. During an adventure was strictly prohibited. She said she didn't want to lose anyone else in the family, and what felt the same. He never wanted to feel that loss again. 2 years ago, he watched the news on while the district of them was destroyed by a dungeon break. Rescue operations were in progress, but survival was considered impossible. Dungeon disasters had become a problem. More and more serious. In recent years, he and Lu grew up together in an orphanage. They admired the adventurers, so they left the orphanage to pursue this dream, but the one they should go back to, and all who still lived in Afani, were disturbed by the rupture of the dungeon. This tragedy his determination to prevent such disasters happen again. What he didn't know was that someone was watching all the time. He was the end piece in one person's plan. A strange and disturbing presence brushed your senses. But before I could understand it, a magic circle appeared on his feet. It was a teleportation trap. Dine yelled at everyone to get ready. Those who set the trap were anxiously awaiting the arrival of Yuki. They landed safely, but it was immediately clear had been transported directly to the boss's room. An reacted instantly, ordering that everyone form a circle and protect the perimeter. He also told Yuki to prepare the return item. Lute felt something was wrong. A pool of blood on the ground began to boil, and a figure slowly emerged from it. It was a man dressed in a butler's uniform. Instinctively, they assumed he was the Demon King. The title of Demon King was reserved only for dungeon bosses of classes, the most violent and dangerous beings of all. Yet, the man before them seemed nearly offended by the silence. Sak attacked. Thonan formed a spear of ice. He prepared to throw it against the enemy. When Serve closed the distance in optimal range, she released the luminous lash. The man blocked the attacks effortlessly, commenting that young people today did not have manners. He added that they too were ignorant. But figures appeared: elf mates, beastmen, and others. He wasn't thrown away. A woman with elf-pointed ears attacked with magic, commenting that some extras, unnecessary people had accompanied their target. Suddenly this monster appeared before Biza. The king of the beasts kicked Biza to the side. Lutz was paralyzed in shock. Before managing to react, a man wearing a hat appeared behind him. Suddenly, another magic circle formed on the ground, and a calm voice commented that it was not game time. Someone left him. All saw the true Demon King arrive. Your presence by himself exerted overwhelming pressure. Yuki was astonished by the sight before him. The Demon King used a terrifying wave of energy and fixed his gaze on Yuki. His subordinates immediately knelt. They lined up before him in absolute submission. Thine sage, they were instant from being kidnapped. He desperately searched for an opening. Any chance of survival. The air was suffocating with tension. And what did you even notice? And refused to let it end like this. And quickly flipped the backpack. Knew exactly what to do. Took out an item and pressed a button. The magic circle appeared. He started the return sequence. When the countdown started in 5, he took a step forward, deliberately attracted the attention of the Demon King, and declared that he would be his opponent. The regime appeared. The intrigued Lotus panicked. If Yuki takes another step, would be out of reach of return. Draw towards you. But Kun in and ran back. He understood what Yuki was doing. The count reached 3. Thun and Sak were now far from Yuki. Lute struggled, demanding to know what he was doing. Yuki looked back and confirmed the distance. Everything was going according to plan. Because Kanan understood this sign, the beast man advanced against Yuki. The Demon King asked what he was up to. The count reached 2. Yuki smiled, and replied that it was obvious. He threw the magic item. The bank count. For one, all held their breath, waiting to see what would happen. Yuki declared that he would defeat the Demon King. Choose the item and praised it for its reasonable decision. The countdown has reached 0. The magnetic cycle about the adventurers prevailed intensely. Serve shouted Yuki's name in despair, for they would all be transported outside, except him. Yuki felt peace with his decision. All Serve screamed, and so suddenly they disappeared. The Demon King asked if that was the way to defeat him, and Wat confidently replied that yes, he had saved all those high adventurers. Different rankings of him, if they returned alive, would surely conquer the dungeon one day. Yet, he felt guilty for leaving the loot behind. Before the Demon King was impressed by the Yuki, have thrown away your own life, for the future of humanity. He commented that such a complaint was really spectacular, then offered the human a deal. Yuki didn't expect that, and asked him to explain better. The Demon King said he had heard correctly. He wanted Yuki to join them, and help to conquer more bitches. Yuki was shocked. Fleeing monsters, more bitches. He asked why they would do something like that. The Demon King explained that his species was constantly exposed to danger because of human conquests. Yuki replied that humans lived on the same thread. The Demon King pointed out that if humans just entered the dungeon, the monsters would not reason to get out of your way and attack them. That dungeon had been classified as ranks. From the beginning, she was considered mortal, even during the investigation phase. To avoid further losses, the dungeon itself seemed to need strengthening. And for that, they would have to conquer other dungeon chiefs and absorb its immense magical power. He could no longer allow tragedy suffered by his subordinates. If he repeated the word tragedy, caught Yuki's attention. He realized that the king demon wasn't that different from him. Understood that this plan would require sacrificing other dungeons. The Demon King openly admitted this. He until said they were willing to cooperate with humans, if necessary. All he did was for the good of his subordinates. It was something natural, and what understood this feeling. Do anything for the family, even if it meant dying. He asked the Demon King if you could swear that when you got stronger, wouldn't kill humans anymore, would only drive them out. The Demon King replied that the monsters were connected to their dungeons. If they became too powerful for humans to deal with, then humans would eventually stop coming. Yuki hesitated. Could I really trust him? The Demon King clearly said that if Yuki refused, he could just die. And countless humans would die along with him. I who knew that one day, Conan and the others would return to conquer that dungeon. But if nothing changed, the victims would only keep increasing. Another tragedy would surely come. He thought for a long time. Then made your decision. He would help the Demon King. Without notice, the Demon King held his hand and firmly declared. Who wasn't doing that for the Demon King. He was doing this for humanity. The Demon King was pleased with your determination. From that moment, Yuki became their collaborator. Yuki wondered if anyone like him. It was really suitable. After all, he didn't even have a class. But that's exactly why he was a monster tamer. Monster tamer was a class that only the no class could choose. They looked at him with greedy eyes, mocking that garbage and like him. It would be perfect for monsters to use. More Yuki had no intention of leaving, who did what they wanted. He would be the one to tame them. The Demon King explained that to get into more bitches, they needed to be summoned. For this, he did a collaborator, who was a monster tamer. The condition for becoming a monster tamer was to have the mirror field blank. Her second requirement was to form a contract with a monster. What was essential? There were 3 ways to form a contract. One was to fight and defeat a monster. Another was to understand him and communicate with him. And what did you ask about the third option? The Demon King revealed that the third method was strength. He released a wave of energy that made Yuki scream in pain. Yuki claimed that it hurt and demanded to know what he had done. He was shocked when a screen suddenly appeared in front of him. The Demon King could see everything that Yuki had seen, which made him realize that his actions would be completely exposed. The Demon King had prepared for the possibility of treason, which meant Yuki couldn't ask for help. He would have to do it all alone. The Demon King installed his fingers, and a magic circle appeared over them. Preparations for conquest were complete. It was time to send Yuki to the surface. Yuki panicked. He hadn't done anything yet. The Demon King instructed to into any dungeon. At the appropriate time, he should invoke you to sort it all out. Even so, which still did not understand what counted as appropriate time. He tried to ask, but before I could do it, had already been transported to the entrance of the dungeon, where the other adventurers were gathered. Lute was paralyzed in shock, your tears stopping instantly. And what gave him an embarrassed nod? She ran to him and hugged him tightly, crying even more. Near there, Wade looked at Q-Man, and as if demanding an explanation, Q-Man could just shake his head. He also had no idea. The next day, Yuki went to the administrative office to request permission to conquer a dungeon. Although he didn't expect to encounter resistance, even before entering, the employee explained the situation. Recent activity in the dungeons was no longer focused on cleaning up areas. Instead, most adventurers entered the dungeons purely for money, and I knew this applied to almost everyone, except ranked. That's why the dungeon breaks were increasing, but he also knew that the guild would never admit that. To avoid the stagnation caused by such behavior, strict security measures and entry restrictions had been applied to all the dungeons discovered. The woman showed him an infographic. She added that, in addition to participating in the conquest of dungeons, the classification of an adventurer's contribution could only increase by gaining guild trust. If he couldn't act as part of a verified group, they could not confirm their contribution. Because of this, the guild could not tolerate actions like diving alone, suddenly, without forming a group, and would understood that if someone really intended to clear a dungeon, there was no reason to go alone. Lonely adventurer. They were usually desperate people in search of money, expecting a stroke of luck. He explained that he was requesting a dungeon of rank, and your goal was just to level up. The woman sat in understanding. She designated him the rank dungeon, called the Universe Labyrinth. There were very few reports of monsters, which made it suitable for beginners. He was guided there, and the employee unlocked the gate. She told him to proceed. There was an emergency button that he could press if you needed help. And what did you remember her saying? That security was tight. But it didn't seem over the top. It still made sense. That was a neglected dungeon. Suddenly, the Demon King asked what a dungeon was. Neglected. Yuki almost jumped in fright. He didn't expect the voice to speak directly in your head. Asked if that was a Demon King skill. The Demon King replied that in fact, it was a skill of the Yuki himself. Communication with monsters was basic to a monster tamer. Yuki didn't know that was your first time using a skill. It was a passive skill. Convenient, more disturbing. As he descended the stairs of the dungeon, Yuki explained that a neglected dungeon was that, without management, maintenance or conquest. Simply, there were too many dungeons for a proper response. If a dungeon were rich in resources, then adventurers would crowd her, and in search of profit, and appropriate measures would be applied. The Demon King summed it up simply. The dungeon had been abandoned by humans. He expected the monsters inside her were peacefully reproducing. And what he added, that if the reproduction of monsters reached the limit of the dungeon, she could collapse. He noticed that there were very few monsters in there, but even for a weak dungeon, something felt wrong. Suddenly, the ground shook as someone yelled at him to run. A man and a woman ran past him, fleeing in panic from the head of the dungeon and what looked shocked the huge slime behind them. The Demon King immediately understood. With few humans entering the dungeon, the monsters had resorted to cannibalism. That's why there were so few monsters left, and that's why that thing had grown so much, and what led them towards an alley. But the slime was fast approaching. Even when they were already close, the woman began to lose hope. Your strength was running out. She stumbled and was captured. Your body was swallowed, getting stuck inside the slime. And what asked the Demon King Liber if he could save her after being summoned. Liber replied that it was impossible. The summoning impact itself would blow up the slime, along with everything inside it. That was no good. The woman looked like she was drowning inside the slime. And who had a sudden idea? He jumped right into the slime. The Demon King had as much fun as expected, even at the cost of one's own body, and what would do anything to save someone. He swam through the slimy mass towards the woman. When he reached and held, I knew it was time to invoke the Demon King free. A violent explosion of energy interrupted and liberal hands began to manifest. Liber allowed him to use his power in the middle of the invocation, and the one that spat blood was as if his body was being burned from the inside out. A picture, Liber's holographic, appeared behind him and told him not to believe. Liber tried to cross the magic circle. I have a finger. Cannot help but be surprised. That was all I could muster. Even at maximum power, was weak, but still enough against the enemy of that level. Power concentrated on his fingertips. So Yuki got the cast down. A devastating beam hit the enemy and caused an explosion. Massive. Yuki realized how terrifying that power was. It was nothing less than a disaster. Everything in front of them was annihilated. The woman regained consciousness and trembled, saying it was scary. The man noticed Yuki's wounds. Blood flowed from Yuki's eyes and mouth. The man asked him to hurry out, saying he looked seriously injured. Only then Yuki realized how bad his condition was. His vision blurred, and he fell face down to the ground. A few days later, inside the dungeon, Infinite Abyss, Yuki told Liber that its first ranking advance had occurred while I was unconscious. He received the notification at the hospital. He mentioned that he had scared the two adventurers. But still, they carried him out and reported everything correctly. Liberal asked why he looked shot down and invited him to a toast. Instead, Yuki said he didn't understand, because everything I had done outside invokes that. He felt hurt when he realized that the invocation was the only thing in which I could contribute. Liber pointed out that Yuki had not given up his lie in front of you at that moment. Instead, he had seized another possibility. Without hesitation, Liber said he liked that strength. He offered a glass of wine, and what he accepted and thanked for the compliment. Liber admitted that he wore the Yuki's suit, almost died every time I invoked him, so he introduced someone Yuki could summon next time. Her name was Elvena, a maid dead alive. Yuki realized how calm and composed she was. She joked that falling in love with her at first sight would be problematic. After all, she had no wrist. The living dead joke was not very well received. Yuki worried if she would be okay. Liberal reassured, saying she was stronger than him. Elvena said she wanted to be a maid, flexible and easy to handle. They decided to focus first in increasing the level of Yuki. He needed to get strong enough to withstand the sweeper invocation properly. Soon several maids approached them. Elvena just punched him. All threats were instantly eliminated. And what realized how strong she was. They were inside an Frank dungeon. The lair of angels. Elvena around him, declaring proudly that she was a competent maid. And what did you remember about a child in the orphanage that began to seek attention from same shape, always playing with him? The trail didn't last long. A flurry of tear-up notifications appeared, almost driving you crazy. Elvena was surprised that he found it irritating to go up level. She wondered if that was some kind of living joke. They came to a darker section of the dungeon. Luke realized he could keep the sheep summons for much longer than that of Liber. She explained that Liber was just too special. The amount of mana necessary to invoke it was so immense that the invocation was interrupted in the middle of the process, and what I knew was true. He had only been able to summon the fingertips of Liber. Elvena concluded that in comparison, she was someone Yuki's mana could easily sustain. Yuki replied that she was reliable, and it made her blush. And what did you notice? That invocation wasn't just about brute power. Efficiency also mattered. They found a sealed door. And who wondered how they would get in? Elvena stretched out her arms and punched. The door shattered. She casually commented that she was just hitting. A warrior guarded on the other side. Elvena advanced. The warrior wielded a burning sword, but Yuki noticed something strange in the fire. He called a dagger. She deflected the blade just before reaching Elvina, yet a trace of flame brushed her cheek, making cracks spread everywhere. Yuki asked if she was okay. She asked when he had noticed the secret attribute of the flames. He replied that they just looked different. Were different from the fire of every dungeon. They resembled light. Elvira explained that holy flame were a natural enemy of the living dead. She joked that it made her heart race. Even if your heart had already stopped, Yuki said it wasn't the time for jokes and asked her to back off. But the warrior activated a cycle of sanctuary fire. Elvina realized that the boss of Mesmera was similar to Leader, so I couldn't let them escape. Yuki considered summoning Liber, but Elvina prevented him. With its current strength, could only invoke them. They had no choice but to face them together. Elvina commented that it was a cruel joke, a monster tamer beyond the front line, instead of your monsters. But that was exactly Yuki's plan. They were funny. Her lips bowed in a smile. Now she was fully committed to fighting. Next to him, Yuki would show the head of the dungeon their growth results. And if it was necessary, she would protect him. Elvina and Yuki prepared to face the head of the dungeon. Yuki hoped to get a new skill. After leveling up, he got the Eye of Truth. With her could read the enemy's abilities. She described the holy fire with a flame that exorcised and became absolute against beings of dark attribute. Elvina asked what there was wrong when Yuki looked at her. Her skill appeared, made entirely of wind. It increased all parameters for a limited time. At the same time, the system warned of an attack, imminent head of Mesmera. The fire spiraled towards them, and the one who Elvina and pulled her out of the way. He said now, could see the attributes and abilities of the monsters, along with your danger levels. She replied that this was one of the skills, basics of a monster tamer. Eyes that revealed the truth of monsters. He still couldn't see it all, but it was a good start. They prepared for the next attack. Elvina moved quickly, dodging the flames. She advanced straight against the head of the dungeon, now could attack with confidence. She kicked him. There was no reaction, and what was astonished, Elvina realized that her attack had not done the damage. Eok explained that he had just discovered that the head of dungeon was, actually, a fire monster. Elvina was speechless. At first glance it seemed obvious. He clarified that little fire monsters, amorphous, moved inside the armor, constantly changing to avoid attacks, so his shots weren't hitting. She didn't reach their true bodies. Yuki could see letters and indicators. Little by little, they decided to change the strategy. Elvina provoked Yuki, telling him not to get carried away by the performance. Hers this time, he warned that the chief was preparing an attack, and that she needed to jump, so Yuki started giving orders. Download, retreat to the right. The next blow would come from below, then aim for the left arm, on the right shoulder, and finally on the head. The dungeon chief staggered, visibly disoriented. Yuki told her to back off for now. It was the first time that the boss showed a clear reaction, but still barely managed to dodge. He ordered her to dodge to the right. Suddenly, Yuki was caught off guard and hit. Luckily Elvina and saved him, remembering to take care of your own safety too. When they reached a safe distance, and Wood apologized, so Elvina suggested he use her skill. He checked the description. He explained that a monster tamer could activate the force, the skill of a hired monster. This ability would increase your attributes just for an instant, and Watt realized that if he used it, would have to finish the fight before the enemy could react. It could only be activated once, which meant the timing needed to be perfect. Elvina did oppose, cute, and said she trusted him to use it correctly. And Watt decided to end the battle. On the next exchange of blows, a series of danger warnings aired before your eyes. He warned of an imminent combined attack, and told her to dodge to the right. After that, she should remain exactly where she was. Then swiped left. A burst of flame advanced towards Yuki. He was hit and thrown to the ground, but forced the body to stand up and told her not to worry about him. He ordered her to jump to the left, then activated Made of All the Wind. Elvina's shot exploded in power, throwing the dungeon chief to the ground, and opening it deep. The battle is over, and Watt finally relaxed, relieved to have won. Elvina said in a low voice that skill had demanded a lot from her. With those words, she bid him goodbye, and Watt was astonished. She disappeared before he could even get up. He tried to invoke her again, but hear no answer. Finally returned to the heart of the Liber dungeon. Liberal was relieved to see him alive. He asked where the sheep was. Said he needed to talk to her, so he wouldn't let her. Back on the next adventure. Free guiding forward. If Yuki had arrived a little later, couldn't have seen your face. Yuki froze the sheep resting inside a coffin. Confused, he asked what that meant. Liber explained that this was how they mourned their dead. Asked if it was different from the shape, as humans did. and what could not understand what he was hearing. Then Liberal explained better. Alvaro was a maid who died alive. The abilities of his race produced immense power, at the cost of destroying their own bodies. Yoke remembered that skill had a use limit, equal to 1. Now he understood what it really meant. He couldn't accept, never wanted her to die, he just wanted to defeat the enemy. Liber calmly declared that to protect the dungeon, his life had been a worthy price. He believed that she had done her duty to the maximum. He admitted that ultimate responsibility fell on him, the Demon King, but Yuki could not accept this answer. He blamed himself for not thinking it right, for having blindly followed her tears, and because he is too weak to fight properly, on behalf of Owen. Once again he lamented his weakness. And what fell into orbit. Liber said he intended to make Yuki stronger, and what asked if there was anything I could do, some skill that could bring her back. Liber explained that there was no. A monster tamer used monsters. They consumed them, did not fix them, and who refused to accept it. Then someone came, and told the leader, not to be so cruel, was May. She said that a conclusion had already been reached about that subject, but the boy had not been involved in that decision, so it wasn't actually completed. Yoke was recognized as one of the executives, and activated the Eye of Truth. She presented herself politely while he read her information. She is sacred and demonic attribute. She had skill, created order, and resurrection. From her breath failed, she smiled and asked if he wanted to know how to bring sheep back. And what did you feel? A wave of hope. Hear that sheep could be brought back to life. He knew that with May's skill, it was possible. May was surprised that he could see his skills. Because of this, there was not much need for explanation, and what clarified that all you could see were the effects of abilities, and the fact that there were associated conditions, what made sense, and had just awakened the ability. So it was natural for your understanding to be limited. He asked May to explain properly. They formally presented. She was responsible for, supervise everyone inside the dungeon, manage the resources, care for its inhabitants and provide support. The word support caught Yuki's attention. Then she explained better how humans constantly invaded the dungeon. Her kills they existed as a guarantee. Even if someone died, she could resurrect him and stop the dungeon from collapse. The moment Yuki heard that, demanded that she resurrect the sheep immediately. They calmly recalled that there were conditions. First, the skill consumed an enormous amount of magic, was extremely inefficient. For example, if she killed Yuki, then resurrected him, the cost would be equivalent to the magic needed to build an entire floor of a dungeon. For a human, this in itself was already excessive. For Ulfina, would demand her even more. Explained that using the skill would make the dungeon shrink dramatically, and what he immediately understood, a smaller dungeon, it would be so much easier of being conquered by humans. She confirmed it and added that even executives, including her, were strongly opposed to this. The dungeon would only lead to more deaths, and what suggested, slowly accumulate unused magic. Over time, with enough time, maybe they could get enough together for a single resurrection, but that wouldn't work either. The second condition demanded the remaining magic of the individual himself. The magic of listening still existed, but it would completely dissipate for 10 days at the most. So they urgently needed get magic from another source. Mai confirmed his conclusion, and said that was why I had sent to conquer a slightly bigger dungeon. Now and what finally understood the true purpose of conquering dungeons, stealing magic from other dungeons. May's resurrection ability could be used without restrictions. This was certainly one of the objectives. However, the dungeons I've been encountering until now were far from enough. And what did you ask? How much magic would it really take? If even an F-level dungeon or a level dungeon would require both. Maya admitted that she did not understand human classification systems, but shared that, when the purpose, attack a truly large dungeon. Everyone else dismissed the idea as a suicide. They couldn't risk exposing the core of your main plan. What? Ulfan was sacrificing his own life to protect, putting you in mortal danger once more. Ewok volunteered. Release immediately called it reckless. He asked if Yuki had any plans, since so much Yuki, as any other new monsters, they would probably end up like Elvana. Yuki admitted that he had not yet discovered, as conquered by the, or how to become stronger. But if that were the only viable way, he had no choice, no matter what. He knew that that was the reason to free. I've made a contract with him, from the beginning. Leader accepted his answer. Although I was about to refuse when someone takes. You the butler took a step forward, and volunteered to train Yuki. Yuki immediately recognized, was the man who plundered had faced, but was pleased to see the Wind support the plan. Wind argued that with Yuki's current strength, danger and sacrifice were inevitable. Didn't care where he went. Lieber understood. He entrusted Yuki to Wind for the next 7 days, and ordered Yuki to follow him. Yuki also placed his trust in him. Michael commented that he could finally relax, as the wind was exceptionally strong, but Lieber insisted that he accompany them immediately. Considering that Wind had opposed the use of humans until the end, there was a real chance he would just kill him. But recognized that it was a valid concern. Wind and Yuki entered, in a magic circle. When Yuki opened his eyes, was shocked, realizing that they were still inside the dungeon. Wind explained that this was another aspect of power of the Demon King. Each executive received a personal floor from the dungeon to use. Yuki was the first human to see an executive's floor. Wind told him to consider it an honor. When seeing the dungeon scale, and the number of floors she had, and what did you notice about the resurrection, really was a last resort. He asked the Wind if the training would help to level up. Wind explained that for humans, leveling up meant eroding the magic of others, of entire monsters or dungeons, and assimilate them into yourself. In other words, adventurers damaged the dungeons simply by fighting inside them. They took the magic to themselves, and what had signed a contract with the Demon King. Although executives had different receptacles, all shared the magic of the Liber dungeon. Because of this, conventional leveling was impossible, and what realized that this was another reason why Free had sent him the other dungeons. Despite the risks, he asked the Wind how he intended to train him. Wind threw him a sword and what he instinctively attached, and understood that Wind intended to arm it adequately. Wind said there were countless things to teach him, starting with the fact that Yuki had no basis at all. He wanted Yuki to transform the techniques who learned in real strength, because Yuki lacked power, lack of knowledge, and lack of talent. Yuki barely had time to process this before the Wind hit him. Wind said that if Yuki wanted to recover Elvena, first needed to build a base. Technical strength, knowledge, talent all. Wind moved so fast that Yuki doubted he'd keep up with. Wind said if Yuki failed, then the fate of it all would have to be entrusted to someone else, that caliber, and what felt the murderous intention, then realized it wasn't exactly that. Wind clarified that he would not make such a judgment lightly. For the sake of Masmara and Lord Liberal, and what did you understand then? That when someone like him died it didn't matter. Wind gave him a condition. Survive for 3 hours, to really make the soldiers. Nothing surpassed that. On the brink of death his blades collided. And what did you swear? Bear your own health to bring her back to life. Yuki activated his demonic eye of truth, revealing the skill of Wind, blade of blood paddles. Every blow was lethal. The difference between them was so great, that Yuki couldn't even see his way out. If he couldn't block the attack, had no choice but to move somewhere. A place he couldn't even see. Where the danger came from. Wind asked if that was really the only skill that Yuki could use. Then attacked again. The blade brushed Yuki's face, leaving a superficial cut. Wind continued its onslaught, but Yuki managed to deflect all the blows. Then noticed immediately, and recognized that Yuki, at least he was able to dodge. However, Yuki's moves were full of actions. Unnecessary. That's exactly why the Wind pointed out that Yuki's counterattack was nullified so easily. Yuki was completely overloaded. Then realized he couldn't, not even gain a moment to breathe, while her judgment was still slow. If he only thought about the next move, after being blocked. This was no different than asking you to die. Waimed with a blade, and delivered a mighty blow, and what he barely managed to block in time. Sparks exploding on impact, while he realized how dangerous that blow had been. And what did you try to think of your next move? He swinged the gun, and pressed the attack. Wind blocked, calmly interrupting the blow. With minimal effort, he said that Yuki forcing an offensive wouldn't change anything. Then with the only blow, terrible wind away, drops of blood spread across the motionless ground. Noak had managed to cut a small part from the Wind hair clip. Wind realized this. Yuki's movements had improved, and what he said he could see the Wind movements. The way he swinged the sword, and the most efficient way to block. So it wasn't just about attributes. With her eyes, Yuki could understand how that monster moved its own body. Wind was impressed that Yuki was not just looking blindly, but still it wasn't enough. Their physique were different. Their sword techniques were different. And above all, the experience among them was of worlds away. Yuki knew he was in a delicate situation. His arms and legs were bruised. Danger boxes filled your vision. And Wind had not yet used any Manhwa. That was pure fencing. Even so, Yuki still had hope of catching up with him. The Wind found it impressive that Yuki maintained such an inflexible spirit. After all that, he wondered if it was simple recklessness or something else. So decided to test heat and ominous power. And danger papers flooded Yuki's vision. At once, he couldn't see anything. If that continued, he would die. There was no future for him, and what decided that he no longer needed danger information. What was most needed was information about Wind's skill. He needed to change his perspective. He was practically dead already. I didn't want information that would only help him to survive. Wind turned blood into blades, making repeated cuts against your target. And what focused on that? Your attacks collided, releasing a violent burst of energy. The shock wave threw rocks and debris in all directions. Then he was speechless. A superficial cut had appeared on her cheek. He looked down at the Yuki who lay unconscious on the ground at the end of the battle. Yuki's body was covered in cuts. Sometime later, and what woke up startling, Wind was waiting for him by the bed and told him to follow him immediately. Yuki was a little disoriented. He remembered copying the Wind skill during the fight and asked what had happened to his injuries. Wind replied that he had never healed them. How Yuki hadn't died. It wasn't necessary to spend a lot of mana. At the bottom, Wind was already waiting for Yuki to try to adopt his technique at such a critical time. It just made me even more curious about what to expect. Somehow, true Hulk training would start now. First, they entered a room full of monsters. Of course, and what got scared? The number of enemies was high. More Wind believed he could deal with it easily, and the one who unsheathed his sword. He was starting to get used to it, with the idea of death. Next thing he knew, the confusion. He couldn't understand why he had been assigned to serve tea to monsters. In addition, he was dressed in an Ordemo's uniform. Wind explained that a high-level swordsman did not allow wasted movements. In posture, in displacement, and even in the smallest gestures, everything needed to be perfectly optimized. That's why Yuki needed to learn to eliminate everything unnecessary. A butler's job did not tolerate failure. Its attack, not even the slightest tremor at fingertips, was practically, I need to learn to command the whole body. At the same time, it was also necessary, learn to use skills correctly. Pieces that evolved depending on how they were used. Monsters of various races had gathered for tea, and what needed to read each of them accurately. Understanding exactly what they wanted, and what began, memorizing and observing every move the Wind made. He watched as the Wind served tea and performed his duties. No matter what I did, Wind remained calm and elegant. Even carrying a pile of dishes, when Yuki tried to do the same, your hands trembled. He ended up dropping a plate that spat on the ground. It was then that he realized something important. Just observing and learning wasn't enough. Perform actions with your own body. It was much harder. He couldn't believe how badly he imitated Wind. It was something I had never noticed during battle. This perception led to the understanding that simple, it wouldn't work. He needed to add his own interpretation. He started screaming about how he really and command your whole body. The next day, he served an intimidating monster. The creature became interested in Yuki, for him human being, with whom the Wind often talked, which meant he must have been strong. Yuki clarified that it was still in the process of make stronger. The monster offered to train him, the force and hit him, and what was with little resistance, he activated his eye and used, accompanied the movements of the Wind, and the monsters around, tested your time, and a punch hit the monster's chin squarely. On the fourth day, he served a lizard-like monster. Using your eye, realized he was cold. Did, predicted and acted accordingly. He put a blanket on the lizard monster, and immediately started to like him. The monsters there were incredibly diverse, nothing like humans. Little by little, Yuki began to understand why Wind had chosen this kind of training. On the sixth day, your guest was a lovely little bat. He was hungry and what served him with confidence. Just to realize he wanted your blood. The bat's ability was to suck blood, allowing him to consume it as food substitute. On the seventh day, Hyokun demonstrated his serving skills, tea for the Wind itself, and asked how he had done. Wind discounted points for taste and the language, but your conduct was approved. It's been days since Yuki did anything. In addition to fighting and participating in tea, somehow he had resisted it all. No final, something finally fit. More Wind corrected. He said, Yuki was just reaching the final stage. This stage was a battle against him. Wind activated the blade of blood paddles. Yuki immediately landed. Your sword. Wind was impressed. And what now? Could activate your eye instantly. Before he had unconsciously mimicked the ability. But now was no longer enough. If what didn't make your skill, he would die. Yuki didn't need to be told. That death was a natural result. He activated your eye, and the description of blood paddles blade appeared. The ability turned the stored blood into slides, making repeated cuts against the target. Normal defense was impossible, could only be diffused by an attack of the same type. This time, Yuki could see everything much more freely. And now he knew how to use his own body, and activated the same skill, blade of blood paddles. And the swords collided. For your shock, Yuki's sword shattered. A cut opened in her, and blood gushed. Wind was disappointed. He wondered if Yuki had stayed just one step away, to whom blood has accumulated on the ground. Yuki felt regret. He still hadn't saved Elvana. He warned the wind not to impose limits on him, otherwise it would have a problem. Using blood on the floor, Yuki activated his own petal blade version of blood. It transformed the stored blood in countless thin blades, releasing a storm of cuts. Normal defense was impossible, could only be diffused by an attack of the same type. Wind was astonished. Yuki hated skill. Yuki's refused confirmation after failing once, instead, chose to win by quantity. A rain of swords forged from blood fell over Wind then. Yuki attacked with his blade. Wind blocked. He was genuinely impressed. Yuki asked for his opinion. Wayne replied that Yuki couldn't use that skill. In quick succession, Yuki Kambalu. He had reached his limit. Wayne held back before it fell. Neither noticed that Yuki's cell phone, out of your pocket, while the wind supported. As they walked, Wayne told Yuki he still had a lot more to teach you. A message arrived. Lou reported that it had found the request for exploitation of some bitches he had asked about. She was worried about him. Even though it is a joint mission, it was still a D-level dungeon. And the boss inside her was unknown. Yuki informed Liber, who would enter a level D dungeon. Liberal realized that Yuki had already acquired a quantity considerable power. Wind commented that, although Yuki's ways were still a little rude, his fencing had become visibly more refined. Liber was curious if someone of level, and like the Yuki, could really get into a B-level dungeon. Yuki clarified that he would not conquer it, he would only go as a research assistant, the same arrangement as one that met for the first time. It was then that they realized that he intended to conquer the dungeon, should the opportunity arise. They asked who he planned to sign a contract. Everyone was surprised by the choice. After that, Yuki went to the Adventurers Guild. Serve greeted you. Noticing the sword at your waist, continues, she asked if he had recently learned to use. But I'd, who apologized for having made such an order, irresolvable. This time, however, Lute didn't care one bit. She used to receive much more specific requests, like this, actually have someone she knew along. Made everything harder. Suddenly, a man pulls Lute. He was accompanied by two other. They asked her to hurry, so they could go to the dungeon soon. When they noticed the Yuki, asked who he was, and what asked the Lute in a low voice, if they were group members. She shook her head, explained that they were not collaborators she had invited. Instead, were volunteers who had accepted the request by the guild. Their objective was simple, rise in rank efficiently, taking low-risk missions, while accompanying someone out of rank. Like her, as Yuki was on the serve, they assumed he was going to rank. When the Lute said he was rankos, one of them asked if this was a problem. The man laughed, thinking you and what have a lower rank than theirs. He kept saying one rank, and it would only be a weight, stating that they were doing a favor with looting, telling her to up that looser and take suitable rank D members. Instead, all Lute ignored and commented that Yuki had cleaned 2 dungeons by himself. Yuki responded vaguely, saying it had been something like that. Men did not believe rank, and cleaning a dungeon alone was unprecedented. Normally, adventurers rose in rank through speed or delivery missions, unless they were aiming for rank or above. Conquering dungeons wasn't even tempted. The group leader got angry. Your original plan was to manipulate, serve to clear dungeons, so I could hitchhike with her success and go straight up to rank. If someone really had cleaned dungeons by themselves, it would ruin your entire chance to stand out. He insisted again, but Lute was already fed up. She stated with firmness that he had been hired to help an investigation, not to conquer the dungeon. Then she explained the current target. A dungeon was estimated to be rank B, known as the Cave of Trapped Desire. Dungeon rankings were determined by the chief. And what did you ask? How they could estimate the boss's threat level? Yahello Serve explained that this was based on the complexity of dungeon. The stronger the boss, bigger and more intricate would be the first floor. Stronger bosses too meant more floors to get to them. In summary, rank was determined by first floor size and the number of floors. According to the records too, dungeon was small, with narrow paths. 22 floors was classified as rank B. However, no matter which room they examined, couldn't find the boss. Eventually, the investigation request was passed on to Lute, although she admitted she wasn't particularly good in this type of war. Suddenly, a huge worm-like monster arose. The blonde man pointed the creature at the leader of the group. That leader immediately shouted at them not to interfere. That was his prey. He split the creature in half with his axe, grabbing half your neck. He bragged to Lute that he had perfectly defeated. Sir felt divided about playing monsters. Was not part of the investigation request, and what realized that being Rancourt also struggle with their own difficulties. The same man, Dido turned to Yuki, and made fun of him, demanding the ranking to do something at least once. While he kept talking non-stop, the wall behind him collapsed. Suddenly, a huge arrow-like monster emerged. It was a golem. Surf and Yuki moved at the same time. She activated the light cut. Judo froze. He hadn't even seen her move. Plunder said he didn't need combat support. She just wanted them to focus, to investigate and stay alive, so Yuki apologized. He attacked carefully, taking the utmost care not to disturb her. Lute asked if he had synchronized the attack with hers and who replied yes. Because it looked resistant, she was astonished. Even if it was only once, the fact that he could keep up was impressive. Especially considering he had started to learn sword. A short time, her face blushed lightly. It was much more than she expected. Now, she understood why the fight had been so quiet. She smiled openly, thanking for the help and complimented on having left, as well as the golem had emerged directly from the wall, and what could not help but think that the dungeons really didn't make sense. Lute told him to leave the fight with her. As they focused on the investigation, Jiddu appeared dissatisfied with the situation. With everything ending up like this, he got even more determined to find the boss's room and make some contribution. After 10 hours, they still hadn't found any traces. The three men were exhausted here. Searched again, but there seemed to be nowhere else to go. In order to reach the next floor, they had already verified the existence of passages. Hidden. Put your hand against the wall, curious about what was beyond. The genius made fun of him, giving him a lesson in dungeon mechanics. A dungeon was a truly isolated dimension. He explained that she just be part of their world. Even if it looked like a cave, it wasn't a real one. Suddenly, Jiddu advanced, throwing the shield in the direction of Yuki. Yuki stood still, badly reacting as the attack approached. Jiddu warned that try to dig the walls of the Basmar would only result in reaching a layer of mana and effort. Yuki responded calmly. That didn't seem like that to him. The Jiddu got confused and activated his special eye. Yuki revealed that the whole cave was made of the same material as the golems he had faced. Contemporary understanding of plunder, she sent everyone back and released the light cut. A hole opened in the wall, and she ordered them in. The moment they entered, were greeted by a gigantic golem. Attention was palpable, especially for Jiddu. Lute realized the truth. They weren't inside a dungeon. Were inside a Sith, who was going through it. Jiddu asked what was the point of this. The answer was obvious. By the ranking. And what did you ask if it meant that they had just arrived to the real first floor? The absurd scale of space gave him the answer. It looked like the outdoors. Lute initially thought he was going to rank, then corrected, was on the verge of becoming ranks. They reviewed the information first, and only then did they confirm the truth. That wasn't a rank B dungeon, but a rank super dungeon. The dessert floor itself was made of camouflaged sit. As a dungeon, Bulk and Lute focused attention on something in the distance. A floating castle. Jiddu realized that the gigantic ship over them had stopped moving. Sak explained that he probably had turned it off to conserve mana. After failing in your goal, he didn't understand what she meant. Then Sak explained that the dungeon probably had been designed to prevent the conquest by someone ranks. Someone like her. This finding made her cautious. Jiddu was shocked. He always believed that monsters did not pass of animals glorify. Lute corrected, but Moras weren't just resource holders. Originally, they were front lines, built to repel enemies who threatened human society. And what already knew about it, he was aware that monsters stole poison. In addition to strategy, in some cases even emotions, Here treated the situation as a blessing in disguise. They had discovered it all before more death could evolve completely to a rank's threat. She decided to attack before she hid. With this, declared the investigation completed. The conquest would begin. She told the others to come back while they could still report the kill. Unfortunately, as it was still the first floor, the portal was right there, but Yuki couldn't afford to leave. He said he wanted to stay. Lute looked at him and asked if he was sure. Seeing her calm expression, and what did you ask if she really wanted him to accompany her? She replied that she needed someone who could take the boss's information back, in case something goes wrong, and among all present there, he was the best choice. She him by the throat, looked straight into your eyes, and said the two would come home alive. And Wood agreed. More than anything. He didn't want anyone else to die. Then, pull the sticker out of your lap like a fly and fire. She activated the light formula and advanced in an instant. Jiddu could no longer see them, yet he refused to just leave. A fragment of liquid crystal fell to the ground. While the Lute advanced towards the floating castle, they followed the shortest way possible, breaking through the floors along the way. Human became so dense that looked like they had reached the deepest layer of dungeon. Suddenly a voice echoed, expressing surprise by humans have managed to arrive that place on its own. A crystallized female figure turned in the air, shining brightly. while your sharp body, like a jewel, to whirl. During the descent, they had found the head of the dungeon, a jewel golem called Carrot. She aimed to become the most beautiful and demon lady. Loot realized that Carrot had accumulated human secretly for this purpose, confirming your suspicion. Little Japanese Carrot polishing her own beauty. Without notice, Haraka activated the critical cutter and aimed at Yuki. At the same time, Yuki activated the demonic eye of truth. He deflected his swift and continuous attacks, which in itself has already impressed the Carrot. Normally the fight would have ended right there. His movements were blindly fast, and a single blow would have been fatal. More compared to wind. She looked almost. Yuki wasn't afraid. He again attacked his blows with the sword. Carrot made fun of him, saying he was a student. His body was harder than golems they had faced before. I who already knew that your aim was not to cause harm but create an opening. And in that instant, Serve dealt the light blow. Carrot retreated in shock when he realized that it had been scratched. Loot recognized that Carrot was resistant, but not indestructible. She fell against the wall. Yuki can't stop thinking about how ranking skills were absurd. Carrot claimed that it hurt. Serve noticed something disturbing. The monster had not lost his composure. That meant there was more to come. She warned Yuki not to let his guard down. He sat down and asked what would come next. Loot continued pressing, falling blows to wear down Carrot. So Carrot spoke, said he had seen it all. Their weakness. She activated the colossal Carrot creation. An enormous amount of mana was consumed, but nothing seemed to happen. Suddenly the surface paled the outside of the golems. Where Dido and the others were had regenerated. The way to the portal has been sealed, Carrot calmly reported, that if they didn't save those men, they would die. Luke realized the truth. Carrot had gathered materials from the golems themselves. The situation has become critical. If they wasted time defeating Carrot, the others would die. But she couldn't either afford to take your eyes off the boss. And what did you tell her to go? They couldn't leave Carrot unattended. So he spoke clearly. He would defeat her. Luke entrusted everything to him before running away. She smiled and said they would celebrate together when they got back. Carrot Rover thought it was fun that someone who couldn't even scratch her stayed to face her. For her, he was nothing more than a sacrificial pawn, but Yuki corrected. That wasn't sacrifice, it was confidence. Seki labor, and even wind. Everyone believed in him. That cloud was the reason he was there now. And that's why he would answer her. Carrot agreed to feel his mana surge. Couldn't understand why a human developed the power of a monster. Yuki declared that from that moment, would fight like a monster tamer. He warned to prepare for a sword technique. Belonging to a monster much stronger than her, Carrot was genuinely shocked. When the Yuki blade cut her body, he had completely learned his skill. By reading your movements, and the flow of power, did not waste anything. Every movement was necessary. She immediately switched techniques. Carrot healing cut. She was confident that with that shape, there was no way he could accompany her. She would annihilate him. And what provoked her, challenging to see if the sword could still reach her. He looked confident, but she felt an opening, and used a slash. Instantly, he used her own toughness against herself, hitting completely off guard. And what struck and crystals scattered from her body. She couldn't believe. He had managed to hurt her from the start. Only then did she really understand the strength of a monster tamer. The fact that he dared to damage his shell in rage. There was no way to forgive such an insignificant human. I knew it wouldn't end there. She'd even more power, finally revealing his true skill. Your cursed class activated skill change. She polished, compressed, and decorated his body, turning into the hardest golem. Sharp and beautiful imaginable. The true power of a dungeon master. Humans were sealed inside crystals, where she extracted mana from. She planned to wear it out. Until he was nothing more than a grain of sand. He didn't even deserve a place in his collection. By a huge Carrot arm. Hammer-like. Walked down towards Yuki. Your confidence has grown. There was no way he killed her, so Yuki made fun of her with making herself. And your gigantic subordinates. Calling it unoriginal. She coldly replied, what jewelry is more valuable when largest heir? Yuki hit, saying that what really mattered was skill. And how beautiful. It was the jewels. He activated the blade of blood petals. Carrot froze when he saw that. Could not understand how the human develop an ability so similar to that of a monster. He said that was his own style. Swords flourished around her, closing on all sides. Your barrier shattered. The blades cut all direction. Blood splattered, as her body was torn apart, and what finally relaxed. He had bet on that move, and it was lucky. Blood dripped from his sword. He felt her weight, while he was on his back, and what didn't realize that Carrot was still conscious. She couldn't believe. Then use the sacrifice. Sacrificing most of your body like disposable material was an absurdly powerful skill, but the cost was enormous. She launched a surprise attack, but Yuki instantly deflected him. He warned again. Could still see through his movements. She realized something important. He was reaching the limit. Once again, Yuki used the blade of blood petals in your own style. She got confused. Why use again, when his body could barely move? Yuki himself admitted. He couldn't move anymore, then invoked help. A lovely little bat appeared. Was the same as had smiled at him before. Inside a leader's dungeon. They had already understood why Yuki chose that monster. Your plan was simple. Use the blood it had stored. The bat's skill was vampirism. Allowing it to absorb blood and convert it into sustenance was a skill that required huge amounts of blood. If both attempts failed, Yuki would die. The danger was real. Yuki could only sign a contract with the monster. That meant the second strike needed to hit. The first attack used his own blood. Wind was deeply concerned that Yuki was on the verge of death, but that was exactly the point. Use weakness as bait to make the enemy let your guard down. His plan was to explore his own vulnerability to approach of the strongest vampire, and then the little bat would do his job. Kurate finally realized that had been his goal from the beginning. When the battle ended, Yuki performed as Yuki, a monster tamer who fights using everything. Enemies and allies alike. He cut the carrot cleanly and perfectly in half. She called him a monster. His body was torn apart in countless jewelry fragments. Yuki replied calmly that was human, a human who had signed a contract with the Demon King. When feeling the power of the dungeon, her eyes burned as if they were on fire. He knew he had already pushed too far. Our boy then began to absorb the mana from the whole dungeon towards your brand, and after a few more moments, was on the verge of collapse, so he entrusted everything to Liber. Supreme Dentiment Loot came at exactly that moment and set him free. She was shocked to realize what had happened, and what had defeated Kurate. Alone, he was too anemic even to stand up. So she supported him in the best way possible. And the media had gathered. Before a man who was about to make an ad, he kept talking about the ranked dungeon. Due to a special incident, the parties involved would be required to submit directly and explain the situation. Reporters took pictures non-stop. That would definitely be cover headline. They called the person's name who contributed most to the dungeon. Only the fake dungeon was huge news. But a successful achievement. On top of that, even the middle-aged officer, experience admiring the responsible adventurer, Lu was called forward. The crowd stirred the moment he flew. As expected from White Lightning. People loved. A reporter asked about the dangers that a dungeon collapse could cause. Another reporter asked if a smart monster had appeared. She asked you to calm down, before explaining quietly the panorama of conquest. At the bottom, she thought it was very uncomfortable, but Yuki had thrown this task at her. The moment Yuki received the document, with the report, delivered everything to her and disappeared. She suggested he stay until the treatment ends, but he was already gone. It made her wonder, what kind of subject could be so important? And Yuki ran straight to Liber's death. And the moment it arrived, asked how the resurrection was, created a wave of power. It was terrifying. Well, replied that he was just finalizing the last stage. Jandu immediately told Yuki to stop looking. Only human could burn your eyes. Yuki realized that despite being there, felt overwhelming pressure on him. But yes, Yuvena. And said the break was officially over. She warned that she would never forgive if she stayed forever in the underworld. When activated afterlife approval, the currents of mud around them began to move. Then, becoming opened my eyes and what finally relaxed, to see her standing. She asked why he looked so relieved. Then realized that he must have died. And what told the truth, she had come back to life. She already knew it was because of the resurrection of the maid, but he believed his death had been meaningless. So the result surprised her. He breathed a long sigh and said how happy he was, because she was still so full of energy. Since I had just said that to a zombie. She asked if that was meant to be a living dead joke. He immediately shouted that he was not. Wind interrupted the conversation and sent them back to work. Immediately, he ordered them to change clothes. Yoke sighed and asked if the job involved being a butler again. Elvina bowed his head and asked if he had ever worked as a. He denied at the time. It was then that I never brought their clothes. Yuki wore a suit that left him with a refined appearance, almost like a distinguished. He faced himself completely confused with the clothes. When he revealed why, that day, Yuki was the star. The monsters in the room exploded in shin. We're glad he survived. And excited to finally meet the human who you've heard so much about. Some even said he had saved them. And what was completely lost. Liber explained that the dungeon that what conquered contained an enormous amount of magical power. Because of this, never managed to resurrect many more people than I expected. and being sincere, she was exhausted, and what finally realized that all there had been resurrected. Liber said that everyone was curious about the human responsible then met. The monsters never imagined that they would be saved by a human, and this realization filled them with joy. They invited the Yuki to drink and tell his story, but Elvina immediately pulled him away. She declared that she was the first. She was also confused, especially because what it looked like he had made something amazing while being. Yuki desperately got free for help. Liber just smiled and said because of the choice that Yuki did at that time, all there had been saved. He praised me and said get used to the shape, as they expressed gratitude, but deep down and I knew I hadn't done it for them. Elvira simply turns on the image of the girl from the orphanage, while he still watched the monsters interacting. He remembered his days with children in the orphanage, and that alone made it worth having managed to save them. Suddenly, a wolf monster commented on a rumor that Yuki was Win's number one. Elvina screamed in shock without thinking. Win said calmly, I still need it. Hammer the basics into Yuki, the so-called party star. Liber provoked, saying he should really like Yuki to complain so much. He had even prepared clothes for him. Wind rebounded saying that Liber was equal. At the beginning, he thought they were the ones wearing Yuki, but actually Yuki used them and delivered results far beyond expectations. Leader looked at Yuki with fun. He stated that Yuki was the key to conquering the world. In Quantumizo, Lute asked the reporter to repeat the question. A silver-haired man wearing interrupted and demanded that they bring the man soon. He met the true conqueror. I knew they were hiding someone dangerous and wanted Yuki for you before. Of this incident, a man was being intimidated in a narrow alley nearby, while a dropped cell phone suddenly began broadcasting news from a press conference. Chaos. The man panicked and yelled that he knew nothing. It was cattle. With an injured face, he screamed that it had been looting. Who brought that guy? The man in the over the night sky, and installed the tongue, another dead end. He claimed that they had two low-level adventurers, and it had gotten nauseating. Suddenly cattle remembered Yuki's name and released him. The man started. He remembered seeing a poster about Yuki. Cat thought that would be enough to save him. After all, he no longer had anything to do with that. But for the man, loose mouths were dangerous. He told the cat to blame. The mouth itself activated his ability and eliminated him the next day. And the one who walked around town holding flowers. It's been a while since he's been surrounded only by humans. He was taking a day off from the angles of dungeon raids. He decided not to think of any of that. After all, that was the date he had known everyone. He went to visit the monument, a memorial of the Great Collapse, built to remember the huge collapse of the dungeon. That occurred years ago. He honored those who died in the Great Collapse, and what had many stories that I want to tell them. Become an adventurer, conquer more brunettes, learn fencing. So someone got your attention. The man in the red sweats. I was sitting in the middle of the road. At first Yuki thought it was a loot. But not. That man was waiting for him. Was the guy. His name was Zapper, a true ranked adventurer, who worked in the same area. Yuki asked if they had met before. Zapper replied that that was the first date. Said he had come to watch you. And Walt was surprised, and said it was just Rankos. Nothing impressive. Zapper mentioned the foray into the fake dungeon. Told Yuki not to hide that. He already knew Yuki was pregnant. Yuki frozen. He wondered how the Zapper knew. And if your monster powers had been exposed, that would be bad. So he said Lute deserved the credit. Claimed that he had only evacuated other adventurers. But I realized that wasn't true. He said Yuki was the one who killed the boss, while the White Lightning was busy dealing with the Golans. Added that Yuki had abilities capable of facing a boss to rank. What made Yuki on the alert? This man knew too much. Yuki denied, saying he just hid and ran. Zapper didn't understand why. Yuki was still desperate to hide this, but told him to listen. Cleaning some brunettes was not like ordinary work. Have a lot of henchmen. Did not form a real squadron. To make money for real, it was necessary to have excellent weapons. High-level weapons. Yuki asked if Zapper was talking about him. Zapper explained that no matter how strong were Yuki's class abilities and ground forays in, but as souls had limits, a group was different. Of course his share of the profits would decrease, but the number of places he could make money would increase dramatically. So, Zapper invited Yuki to earn money together. Yuki thanked for the offer, but refused. His goal was not money. Zapper accepted the rejection, admitted he wasn't very good with words, so there was nothing to do. Yet, he planned to test it anyway. So now I wanted to fight. Yuki was shocked. Zapper released the fire hammer. The flame burned the flowers that Yuki had brought. Yuki was stunned. Magic right there in town. Zapper was impressed that Yuki defeated. It just made him want Yuki even more. And what screamed for him to stop, especially because they were in a resting place of the dead. He remembered that using magic on the surface was illegal, but for Zapper to reject his offer, it was a much bigger crime. He activated the stone prison, restricting Yuki and his skills. Zapper commented that Yuki looked experienced, fighting monsters, but completely aimed in P. Yuki tried to use a skill, but Zapper covered his mouth to stop him. Then, activated the ice prison, freezing the mouth of Yuki. Zapper realized that Yuki was nothing like him. It was actually the opposite. Someone who specializes in cleaning more bitches. That's exactly why he wanted him. He pushed Yuki to the ground. Said he would follow him through every raid and would do it to him again and again. Said Yuki to cry to the guild, or call ranks if you wanted. But the Zapper was known as a skill killer. Adventurers were no match for him. Yuki faced him in hate. Zapper left there waiting for an answer, and so disappeared in a trail of flames. In Quantum Izzo, the leader played chess calmly, while feeling someone trying to steal your pawn. What dissed you? Mike cured Yuki. Yuki planned to stay there for now, in case the Zapper tried to break in. He needed to come up with a countermeasure. When asked why he didn't have the sword, Yuki explained that it was his day off, and who carry a gun in the city would attract problems of his level. Interrogation would be a nightmare. But even if he had set up, he admitted that he would still lose. He had no idea how to deal with that magic. Liberal remembered something important. He was a monster tamer. Suggested using monsters, since they were experts in magic. So help someone. It was Mashinami Takewa. And AF. She said she was in the middle of research. No one understood magic better than her. So Liber told Yuki to learn from the abyss. Same as her. Clearly didn't want to at Liber's death. But Shimi said to Yuki, who never got along with that grumpy old man. Yuki realized he had never seen it at teas or dances. What irritated her immediately, she said she would never attend a party organized by that old-fashioned. He was always teasing her about trying to look young, or some like. When she was still in her early 30s. And what problem? With caution, she clarified that it was something around 1,000 years old. More or less, a scale big enough. If they asked her, then revealed, casually there were only 1,499 years. She suddenly noticed something fun, become the strongest winged disciples. That old man would certainly hate it. Then your cute would get so attached to her that wind would die of envy, and eventually, some law prohibited that transcend the bond of master and flower shop. And what interrupted, saying I just wanted to learn magic. That alone was interesting enough for her to agree. After all, developing magic required simulation, and she took him to the library, and who was shocked by the colossal size of the place. Asked if all those books were about magic. She said that wasn't even half. Most of her floors were made entirely from books. By his expression, she realized that he didn't even understood what magic really was. In a provocative manner, she the number one character. And asked if she was right. Then asked a simple question, where magic is different from a skill. This made Yuki stop for. She herself replied, skills were individual capabilities. Magic on the other hand. It was a universal capacity. I had no idea what that meant. Then she explained that the skills were widely categorized into 3 types. First, skills gained through intelligence. Second, skills that each race naturally is. The end skills, born from the sublimation of a technique totally dominated. They were all cheats. Movements achievable only through the body itself. Technique and talent, so it was impossible. Even though 2 skills looked identical, were fundamentally different in their essence. She tried to stimulate his memory, remembering that he had already put this first and who remembered using the blood petal blade. Then replied that he understood perfectly. What did it mean? That magic should be the opposite. She smiled, and said he was right. No matter who used. If the same magic were conjured up with the same mana, and the same enchantment, the result would always be identical. A universal law, an absolute law. That was magic. And what started to get excited. Then she asked the second question. Because so many people didn't use magic. And what did you think it was? Because of strict requirements. They consume an insane amount of mana. But the real answer, it was much simpler. It was too hard. He asked if it was, because controlling the mana was complicated. She shook her head and said that even intuit the enchantments was difficult. Proper magic demanded long enchantments, like a whole book, even for basic spells. And what did you say? That I had never seen anyone into something for so long. Normally, skills just demanded something, like calling fire or something. This led directly to her third question. She asked if he knew how people were doing intuiting those spells. Yuki thought a little and suggested they must be using something to assist the. That was the correct answer. Tools like sticks could replace parts of the enchantment. Ridiculous angles could be funny. Some excerpts could be sung internally. Others partially omitted. and what realized that it was possible to modify. She added that this was the beauty of magic. The more you learned, but could cheat. As an example, she casually said, "Fire hammer." The burning hammer formed in his hand. She explained the enchantment violation, the act of completing all the enchantment, and visualization entirely within the mind. Before speaking, was a fundamental surgical technique. However, the result varied according to how deeply someone understanding, or original enchantment. Some reproduced it as text. Others like pictures, sounds or combinations between the three. It varied from person to person. And what finally understood, because spells that sweated with as could still be different. While he understood this, she demonstrated the result. She invoked invasion combined with a screen of fire. And what he watched carefully, she sprayed the flames in her hands, explaining that it was possible, preserve only parts of the original enchantment, while filling in the gap with the full version. And what finally understood what magic really was, and was astonished. For now, he just needed to memorize the enchantments. She agreed, but warned him that mechanical memorization would be the limit. Enchantment was essentially a command for magic. If he didn't know which sentence he was uttering, what his, I would never be able to modify spells or create new ones. And what did you notice? That it was like learning a new language, and he wasn't even good at English. She laughed and reminded him that humans didn't have, not by far, as long as she. So he should be funny about it. She activated her magic and summoned a living library, and what he could only face, as the space around it transformed. Instantly, she explained that magic allowed directly understand the contents of a book. They were now inside the world of fire magic. Even a slime could understand a book she wrote herself. If Yuki cleaned up the virtual dungeon, he would completely acquire the content. And what liked the idea because it matched its strengths. It was then that she threw a pile of books on top. He told him to read them all, the main attributes and their basic variations. Yuki got excited and asked if she wanted to say and pick all of them. She smiled and said yes, of course, and challenged him not to call it impossible. A gigantic snake advanced on Yuki. He smiled in the sight and woke up in several pieces. When seeing his reaction, Emma's eyes shone. Yuki confidently declared that he would finish everything very quickly. 3 days later, inside the floor machine Tekua of the Liber dungeon, 2 tornadoes swirled on each side, as in fired forward. She tore the air at full speed, letting out a shrill scream. And the one who struggled to intuit an enchantment that interfere with the wind attribute. The environment itself was too violent. He was thrown away. But continues to sing with serrated teeth. Then Shinami took air. And the huge hand of compressed air, moments before it hits the ground. The Shinami began to comment calmly that number 1 really had no talent to stay stretched on the floor, and what he admitted he finally understood, because adventurers didn't intuit spells in combat. Real opening was just too big. She said the magic was never originally made for combat. She existed to deceive the world and write it according to the user's wishes. And what listed the elements allowed fire, earth, water, lightning, ice. Every spell should be powerful. He fell under stone. The project flew, then dropped uselessly. His eyes widened. While complaining about how ridiculous it was, he realized that the enchantment break lost too much power. As said, steps were skipped, but the differences individuals were excessively evident. The enchantment was a commando phrase that summarized the world through mana. When parts were omitted, the command itself became vague. She noticed his biggest flaw and what was bad in filling gaps with imagination, no matter the element. Whenever he used enchantment break, the result was almost zero, and added more to regain power. I could never keep up with Zapper. He wouldn't be able to act in time. The Zapper magic. In quantities that Zapper always could, against attacking him with magic that would have the advantage. Elemental, she said it was something he would face constantly. For example, the earth couldn't cross the wind. And he hadn't even learned all the attributes yet. Yeah, she gave you hope. The next attribute, wind, maybe was his specialty. She made Ariane take Yuki away. Yuki returned to training, hopeful that he will finally would find an element that was good at, but couldn't help but wonder. Sapper didn't even have a bad attribute. In Quantum several adventurers had hit the camp at the bottom of the mountains. Sapper was surprised to learn that Yuki had entered a ranks dungeon. One of his men reported that they were looking for all parts just to realize that Yuki had gone straight into that dungeon. Sapper remembered her well here, forced up to 2 ranked groups to retreat. He thought it was fun. It was a place that ordinary adventurers couldn't even get close. Asked him what they should do. Sapper replied that it didn't matter, for they would also enter. The man panicked and refused. They hadn't finished eliminating the monsters yet. Most important, it was dangerous. Sapper forgot it was dangerous. A gigantic mouth, full of razor-sharp teeth, suddenly rose above them, suspended in the air, and overing the 2 figures below. They were shot. A giant worm had appeared. He advanced towards Zapper. Soon to Indolilo, Zapper didn't even. He took the water, put the ice, stone prey, lightning bok, storm surge, fire mat, multiple elements, breaking at the same time and advancing against the worm. He had killed too many monsters. Didn't expect much in terms of materials. The man next to him was paralyzed in shock, watching the Zapper endure spells of all attributes. It didn't matter how many times he saw. It was still unbelievable. Now he really understood the power of a top-class mage of ranking. Zapper said that, but vines were dangerous. That's exactly why they needed to reach him before Yuki was so deep that I couldn't touch it anymore. The man pointed out the damage caused by the monster. Several members of the group had died because of Zapper. They were nothing more than replaceable B rankings. And if they ran out, they could always recruit more. The man protested, saying he was cruel, especially when the Zapper could have saved him with magic. But Zapper refused to waste mana. Beautiful with people like that, he stepped hard on the ground and declared that if he was going to use mana would be to capture Yuki. Was special. In Quanto Izo, Machinami replaces number 1 with a neutral expression and what was thrown on the floor. It felt like your soul had left the body. She said bluntly that he had absolutely no talent to be special. He thought magic should be universal. But in the end couldn't perform the enchantment break. No once. It was the first time she saw someone fail so completely, even with partial. His main attributes were a disaster. So the smallest offered even less hope, as of insects. I who had acquired knowledge, but didn't expect his talent to be so bad. All I could do now was to work with what I had. She told him not to act like she understood magic, and what tried to say something. It was then that she revealed the truth. His training. I hadn't even started the first stage yet. They hadn't even started warming up. She declared that magic existed, so that anyone could describe the world and crush insatisfaction, injustice and even sense itself common. Therefore, she would never allow words like commitment or withdrawal, and what asked how he should do it. She said it was simple. He had already seen do something similar against that old man. Everything he needed to do was to create a whole new magic that only he could use. Warshanami suggested that Yuki apply this theory directly to magic. What he had learned so far was already more than enough for his current level. He could already teach beginners, and what was shocked by the perception. Even though it's bad at using existing spells, he could simply create it. One that was good. That's exactly what Machinami meant. Instead of relying on long enchantments, he would manipulate mana directly through emotions to reshape the world. And then add enchantment if needed. To combat magic, practice it was all. From now on, he would train directly on her guidance. As he spoke, she suddenly turned her head to the side, making Yuki ask what was wrong. She activated the vision, and saw Zapper, releasing a wave of fire, on the first floor of the dungeon. Zapper was looking for Yuki to broaden the search. He activated the search for the win. She showed the scene, Yuki by means of a floating water sphere. Yuki was shocked. Zapper was already there. It looked like he had followed Yuki there. It was the perfect opportunity. She wanted Yuki to deal with him. Using only magic, without invocation. With this, she activated Shrine Conduction. It was the same spell that had teleported the Yuki and his group when he first entered the dungeon. Now he understood it was teleportation magic. Yuki wondered if Liber had chosen to walk Mashimantikwa. Specifically, because she could control something like that. Zapper was teleported to the same area. The moment Zapper saw Yuki, he forgot that Yuki water hiding its true strength. He demanded an explanation. Yuki was caught by surprise. Zapper immediately attacked with the aquatic spear. Yuki dodged and ended his sword. Zapper said there was no need for explanations. He could already see the truth, stamped on Yuki's furious face. Tried to imprison him with a stone prison. Yuki cut the stone directly. Zapper commented that Yuki had the potential to become a swordsman. He also realized that Yuki didn't hesitate one bit when the spell appeared, but then Zapper activated the mud trap. Yuki was shocked. Sap pillow, the process of turning mud or combining water and earth. It was much faster than reciting enchantments. Yuki started his own summon. Zapper trying to stop it. Yuki's magic was magic. Zapper was faster. He released the wind hammer. Yuki received the blow head on. Zapper realized that Yuki still depended on charms, but his language skills were still not enough. Yuki knew he couldn't win a battle of enchantments, so decided to create a new spell on its own. Just by the eyes, Zapper realized he was up to something. The magic was a miracle, was the act of rewriting the world. When mana responded to a person's will. That's why there were enchantments and explanations. When a conjurer fully understood the principle, it could eliminate waste and eventually, to the very enchantment. Yuki felt the alarm, sweating as the distance narrowed. He wore an icy smile. Zapper noticed too late. Yuki was planning an electric attack, and what was thrown away. He understood something clearly now. There were forms of magic he wasn't good at. Because miracles never answered him. No matter how much I prayed, all disappeared. None even came back. A massive force advanced towards you, distorting the air and what's forgotten, while the enemy advanced directly in the attack. Stone pillars detonated, shattering and spreading and debris everywhere. Sapper was sure he had struck the final blow. Your eyes whitened. There was no one there, and I believed that miracles did not exist. There was no such magic. He himself admitted that. He didn't understand the real magic. Suddenly, he heard Hanami calling his name. Confused, he asked where her voice came from. She clearly replied that it was magic, her magic, and what he said he was struggling. She offered him advice, said that in terms of knowledge he was already a first-class magician. It meant he could change anything. What he was missing was to decide what kind of magic he wanted. She explained that whenever she used magic, her thinking was simple. It wouldn't be fun if magic existed. He needed to affect this emotion directly into the human, and what knew well his emotions. And the emotion I felt about the magic was anger. The moment he accepted that, the pillar behind which he was hiding exploded, and the whizzed into chaos. In this unfair world, the more anger you felt, the stronger it became. Zebru found again, and realized that Yuki had no intention of stealing. Yuki pushed head-on and extended his hand. He wouldn't wear any enchantment. Zephyr imitated his posture. Zephyr invoked a firestorm, confident that no magic could surpass his. The flames brushed Yuki's arm, and Zephyr thought he had the sticker. So Yuki spoke. Yuki demonstrated a path, completely opposite to that of his masters. There were no lessons for it, but Mako that beautiful. Yuki created a magic, a glow of emptiness. Yuki decided to teach Zephyr a new kind of magic, a magic that rejected all magic. That was your magic. Yuki activated the vacuum generator. He nullified all magic. He was determined not to let Zephyr use magic. No once. Zephyr couldn't understand, because your spells were being cancelled so suddenly at the moment. They answered the next moment. Was like his own world ignored him. He abandoned the idea that he should drag Yuki for your crew. That thought disappeared. Instead, decided I would just kill him right there. He put out an electric spear, and what parried next came the water whip. He crashed into the train, and the chatters spread through him, and what he immediately noticed, your defense was reaching its limit. And Quantizo Zephyr noticed something strange around. Not even the universe was blocking the only element. He was nullifying all attributes, and Zephyr felt an unsettling feeling, realizing that the magic itself was being interfered with, as if the will destined to guide him was being rejected. Human being was being repelled, but Shinami watched from her floating broom. She saw that Zephyr had already recognized this in. He was reasonably skilled. Original magic conveys human will to change the world. Emptiness was the opposite. Through the mana inside the body, he commanded the outer mana not to change. If they had to give a name, she would call it the attribute of emptiness, a magic created solely by number one. Born of your hatred for magic itself. Zephyr, did you know that if the proposed amendment reached a certain level, maybe I could just break it with a gross volume? Then released several elements at the same time. And what agreed? If it only stayed on defense it would be impossible to win, so he combined them and formed a saber of emptiness, and cut it all at once. Dap was astonished. And what destroyed only the most dangerous parts. He repelled the attack with minimal consumption. But Shinami was proud, and I could only be using one attribute, but your understanding was the first class. Although she still hated that old man's fencing with such a skill, and I was confident that I could achieve. Zapper frantically erected a wall of ice, and a wall of wind, but Yuki erased the wind, and as for the ice, just cut it into pieces. Zapper was in trouble. His magic barely worked, and physical reinforcement was blocked by the sword. He invoked a wave of fire. In an instant Yuki lifted again, your shield from emptiness to defend yourself. Zapper started to worry, because that way your mana would end first. He thought desperately what spell could work, or that could break through that defense. And it was then that Yuki found an opening. He released his blood petal blade. In your own style, or Zapper's style. Zapper's eyes were given away. He knew immediately that his defense would not resist. Yuki pressed the attack. Zapper resisted it and caught wind magic. It was an air hammer, and left Yuki stunned for a moment. He never expected Zapper to throw him into himself, just to dodge. There was nothing to do. Zapper decided to save it. Time but warned him that there would not be a next. Said he would find a way to defeat that magic, so he summoned the wings of the wind and flew away. And what was surprised by the calm of withdrawal, but understood that if Zapper remained, would not survive as an adventurer too. Shinami screamed in your ear, furious that he let him escape. If Zapper ran away, that old man would surely make fun of them. He could already imagine his presumptuous smile. Yuki admitted he had a movement, reserved for emergencies. He looked at the seal in his hand and asked if he could remove it, then squeezed the hilt of the sword. In quanto Izzo, during the escape, Sap complained about how bad he felt, and planned what he would do upon his return, but in the middle of the flight he felt something. Human from Yuki exploded when he intuited the complete enchantment, and an ominous energy flooded the whole area. Zapper couldn't believe it. A complete psalm required an enormous amount of time. There was no way Yuki could launch something that fast like that. But no matter how he analyzed human cell from Yuki position, he immediately walked away and maintained the wind thrust, but Shanami wondered what he was planning. And especially because he went far about to use summon magic and invoke the Mother of Chaos, where everything is born, and where everything must return. She calmly began her enchantment. Yuki and Machinami watched as the power turned violently to the around her. Yuki explained that in case the new magic wasn't ready in time, he had taught the spell to Mei by telepathy in advance, and made her sense it. The magic was versatile. Anyone could use it if you completed a full chant. Mai completed the chant and casually commented that Yuki was tough on his maids. Yuki thought like a true monster tamer. He made his companions perform what he could. Maya was a living dead, so tiredness didn't matter. She'd a dark cloud. Zapper panic had no choice but to divert it, then creating a holy shield. The angle was perforated by the upper side, fell and cracked instantly. The crack spread quickly. Then he noticed something about the cloud. It was a cloud of emptiness, just as Yuki would promise. The magic would never work for him again. Zapper was thrown back when a massive wave of purple energy rose up. The violent violence swallowed it all, forcing a scream from him as he was consumed. He put a curse against Yuki, but Tsumemi admired the result. Power and accuracy were perfect. She praised Yuki. He was good at teaching magic. Yuki smiled and replied that it was because he had a good master. Only Zapperming. At the entrance to the free dungeon surface, several armed men in white uniforms, similar to those of assassins, took position. Their corpse was still cleaning another one, brunette. Elsewhere, they believed they could suppress the situation. All alone, the only one they feared was Zapper. The repression squad advanced to capture both Zapper and Yuki. A few minutes later, Yuki came out of the dungeon with Zapper thrown over his back. Moved through a dungeon. Carrying another person alone was exhausting, and it showed that he planned to deliver Zapper to Guild. Before I could take a few more steps, armed men prevented him. They pointed their guns at him, clearly with the intention of taking it into immediate custody, recognizable by the all-white uniform. And what did you know at the time? The group specialized in combat, by guild public order. The execution squad. He thought the timing was perfect, since I was about to deliver Zapper anyway. But the moment when he took a step forward, Ace blocked your way. A short-haired woman, wearing a white uniform, ordered him to stop. She was then that a rank B mate of the execution squad. And what he couldn't understand, because he was also being treated like a dogo. A ranked monk execution squad. Explained that several reports had been registered against the Yuki and other adventurers. They believed that Yuki was a member of the Zapper group, and in the name of maintaining public order, the execution squad intended to detain the two. Yuki tried to explain that he was the victim. Suddenly, Zapper activated the fire explosion. The squadron of execution instinctively retreated. Momentarily distracted by the flame, Yuki reacted instantly, forming a saber from emptiness to defend itself. Zapper laughed and whispered that thanks to Yuki, had awakened in the best possible situation. He fired on the run, and the execution squad immediately started the chase. They threw away spears, reverse cuts, and even demonic arts. Zapper defended himself by lifting layers of ice. In quanto Yuki was intercepted by another member of the execution squad. The situation quickly got out of hand. Yuki tried to translate that was not the time to fight. Then Zapper released a blast, electrocuting everyone around. They fell one after another. He kicked one of the fallen limbs towards the alley. Still aware, this man got the impact directly. He immediately healed his neck, using skill, Beehive reward. While they were distracted, Zapros warned not to take another step forward. The Zapper took them now, and took her hostage. He declared that he was not the same as before, and that they should understand the difference. That distance, Yuki audio would not arrive in time. He couldn't undo the spell fast enough, with shields or swords. Tuku installed the tongue, irritated, tired of cowardly tactics, decided to resolve personally, ordered 2 guards to maintain. Other eyes fixed on Yuki. Yuki could not attack recklessly, with a British hostage. If the execution squad coordinated properly, there was still a chance, but a per zombo. Saying it would be easier to just cut them all off. Protecting people was a big nuisance, considering the number and the complexity of circles, structures that were forming, and what did you know was full-scale magic. At that rhythm, he couldn't protect everyone. He said to hide behind the shadow of your magic, but suddenly, a woman with silver hair appeared, and calmly said there was no need. She activated her fair game eye skill, Then asked Zapper if it was really all human that she still had, and what he immediately recognized. She was the captain of the execution squad and a ranking adventurer, known as the living cult rule book. Ina, a ranked champion, activated your ability. Zap was instantly hit and released the null. It was a terrifying technique that produced the result of the blow, even before the attack. She calmly rebuked him for dumping all the mana in attack. Zapper did not expect that Ina appeared and panicked. She fell stone prison. Ina told Yuki to use her magic. He was shocked by her if you ask me about it, but there was no time to think. Yuki summoned his Sabre of Emptiness. Zapper hastily overcome several elementary barriers. He released Rain of Hatekmes, covering the sky with countless rocks, and Ina immediately realized his intention. He was targeting every member of his squad. It activated the Dispersion Error, a deflection skill that changes the target of an object. The fate of the tribes was exchanged with that of Yuki. Yuki instantly lifted his shield from emptiness as the curtains crept over him. Ina knew he could block. She found herself worried about him, then appeared behind Zapper. She swinged her gun and activated her magic. Zapper received the blow head-on, was checkmate. The squadron moved forward to contain it. Ina commented that he had much less mana than she expected. It suggested he had just left of an intense battle. After that, she thanked Yuki for cooperation. Thanks to his magic, the situation was resolved quickly. Yuki asked how she knew about her magic. She explained that the Eye of Fair Play allowed spying on people's status. Said it resembled the demonic Eye of Truth. His now, it made sense as she knew so much about your skill. How much about Zapper's remaining human? Duogo informed that Zapper had been completely contained and that the wounded had been treated. Then turned to Yuki. Ina stated that the suspicion around Yuki had been clarified. He had still aided in the capture. Duogo added that the accusations against Yuki were probably misunderstood. How everything had not been completely clarified, he couldn't formally apologize. But Yuki would be removed from the list of detainees. He thanked for cooperation and protection. Yuki said everything was fine since evil understood it had been learned. He also offered to help investigate Zapper if necessary. However, Duogo raised another question. The Mara Yuki had come out of was ranks. Solo entry was prohibited. Yuki was speechless. Asmer's challenges required guild approval. And what had previously come into play with the group after an evaluation, round diving was a clear violation. Ina said Yuki's skill wasn't a problem. Hugo replied that this was just the opinion, her subjective. Officially, Yuki was just a rank. Nina then came up with a solution, and what would the dungeon they were managing? No time. Duogo would accompany as supervisor if they judged your skill enough. No investigation or investigations would be required, and what asked if this special treatment was really acceptable. Nina replied that for humanity, the stagnation of conquering dungeons, it was the greatest sin of all. That's why she became offensive. To carry decisions like this forward. She said she was anxious for this achievement of the monster Tanner. He hesitated when thinking of showing their methods for other people. Then we see Free suggests that he proceed as usual. He warned that the execution squad, I would supervise everything closely, and who take monsters capable of talking, could result in revoking your adventurer status. However, if he only took the bass, it would cause an idiot. And Liber doubted that he could clean the dungeon just with that. Liber then suggested that he go ask for help with the task. And what did you remember having served it before? And asked if Task was an expert. Like Mashinami. Liber replied that Task was much more than that, for Task was the master of his dungeon, the sum of them all.